No, Chuck.
No.
I don't think they should go get Mhango.
He's
Is like in
scoring
his
more than
early to mid 30s.
He's still scoring. Do you want a project for the future? Like I think someone who's gonna get the goals now because two are still there and waiting. I don't know if Mabasa is gonna move from Pirates to Chiefs, Jay.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Risk.
You know, that's why I'm saying it's like Zashmovic and Kozulon. Team is always trying to sell players to Kaizer Chiefs, and like you know, if you go there. Miserable times in Soweto. Benyapi, Nkosi yami. My name is Jay. Welcome to the 2UpFront podcast, and I am with Chuck as always. Chuck, how's your weekend? How are you doing?
There's this audio on my phone from the podcast that keeps playing. I have my phone on shuffle, right? But every other week, it seems to find itself in my ears, where you keep saying there's this rare weekend where both Pirates and Man United win on the same weekend, and because it's one of those weekends yet again, cloud nine, at least, man. Especially because we beat Sundowns, so I'm great.
Yeah, that hasn't happened since the year 2020. Sundowns were like 21 games unbeaten in the league at least against Chiefs and Pirates. And Pirates, yeah, they broke that drought for the two Soweto Giants, eh?
Yeah, no, they did. It was due time, man. Yeah, those Shawai Sundowns in terms of them dominating the league, plus these individual rivalries. You can't keep getting worked by Sundowns. At least Guma Cup we win, but generally speaking, it must be competitive.
Yeah, Chuck, and getting into that game, man, like 2 goals in the first 5 minutes. Like 2 goals in the first 5 minutes and 70 seconds, I believe, between the 2 goals by Rele. Because it feels as if the stadium was still celebrating, and then like I'm trying to get my phone out because I'm trying to record something. And then next thing I know, Rele is once again through and goal, and all I see is him slotting that ball beyond Uronwin. And at that point, I knew it was going to be a mountain to climb. Sundowns haven't fallen to 2 goals behind the entirety of the season, so they've never had to come back from 2 goals down. I believe the only other time they've conceded 2 goals was in the game against Iskukun, and they won that one 4-2. And they were always in the lead in that one, or rather, they did not go behind in that game. And the way that Pirates came out with the setup with the 3 centre backs, the quote unquote 5 at the back when they are out of possession, it worked perfectly into their hands because of those early goals, and Pirates could sit back and just absorb pressure and just defend. And they defended with aplomb. You know, my man of the match was Makehlen Makaula. That man is a workhorse. He just goes sideline to sideline. He shields that the back 5 in this case. He's pressing in midfield, going towards the balls. He's always dueling. He's always in a fight, and he's always come out on top in those fights. And as well as Umbogazi on the other side. But I want to focus in maybe on Sundowns. I was disappointed. Sundowns had a lot of possession, but they didn't do much of the possession. I kept on counting to you because we were in the stadium, right? That this is the 3rd time or the 4th time, the 5th time that Ronan Williams is making a save. Pirates are getting shots on target. Sundowns have all the possession, but they're not making chain work, you know. And it was repetitive in terms of the continued go to the right hand side. You've got Umudao and Ribeiro who are doubling up on that side, who are looking to cause an overload, but it wasn't working because again, with the numbers that Pirates had in the defensive line, there was always the left back Uhoto, and there was always Umbogazi, who was hell bent on going into that game and coming out with yet another victory. That boy, that young man, I should call him, because yes, he's quite developed at his age, physically and also in terms of his game. He has the right kind of mindset when it comes to defenders, and Ribeiro felt it. You know, Mudau felt it. Although Mudau did come away with the goal in that second half to make it more interesting, they couldn't quite penetrate Orlando Pirates. And my great disappointment was the fact that it was continuously the same thing. And Coach Ribeiro spoke about this, that we kept on seeing the same thing and we handled it well. So I was happy about that. And Sundowns never really went to a plan B. yes, tried to do something different with the subs. I thought Sellers was required, and I thought Sellers was good in trying to shift those centre backs out of position. I didn't see Ukoki have to do much in that game. I didn't see him or BC have to turn and run. And I didn't see the game plan we've seen from Sundowns and Cardoso most recently, as well as what we saw in the game against Pirates. And I thought that Cardoso overthought himself because he was expecting that Pirates would have a reaction. The reaction came in terms of the formation, but the points in that game where Pirates still were defending a little high. And I was looking for the balls over the top. Where are the balls behind the defensive line? Yes, there are three centre backs, but even that being the case, there's still room to play it in behind them. At least try them. I didn't even see Sundowns attempt those balls. Not from the goalkeeper, who was able to hit those long balls. Not from the centre backs, especially Suarez, who has been adept at hitting the diagonals and the balls behind the defensive line. And nothing. Not even from Mokwena. So Mokwena maybe attempt once or twice, but that was in the opposition half. And yeah, in that kind of sequence, it was congested, so there was not much you could expect in terms of getting purchase from that tactic. But I didn't see it, and I also didn't see like a Ribeiro being moved to the left hand side. Have him go at Dino as well as Koki, because I think that was maybe the weaker of the two wings defensively for Pirates. But we didn't see that much, and then, as I'm saying, on the Pirate side, most impressed, as I did say, Umbogazi, Makaula especially, and one assist as well. He was trouble, and the way Rivero used him, that he wasn't central and he was pulling out to the side. He pulled that the centre back Suarez, especially for the first goal. You see Suarez slipping and Mahopa through and providing then what turned out to be the assist. And with Umudiba like high up on the pitch on his side, there was a lot of space for Mahopa to exploit, and I think he did great in that. Rele, as I'm saying, we didn't see him after the two goals much, but one of the thing that stood out for me with those goals, we've been speaking about him playing as the number 10 with Tito out, and maybe this is where he ends up playing and how he's continuing to grow in that position. One of the great things you get from Rele playing the number 10 is the fact that he does become a second striker, whether he's running into the box, finishing the first goal, or with his technique, picking it up on the edge of the box in the central area, and then he's scoring again. But overall, Sundowns had a lot of the game, and I saw the criticism that Pirates only came to FNB to defend, and you can say that, but defense is part of the game. I always say I've got no issue with the team coming out with the result if the game plan was defensive, but then you still get the result. And Pirates got themselves back into the title race. Maybe there's a miracle that they might pull off, but we'll see about that.
If they pull this off, it's the greatest league victory ever. I don't want to hear anything from anyone about anything. This is the greatest one ever if they pull it off. But obviously, there are games in hand that they need to win. Jay, this season, Sundowns has let teams play. And by that, I mean, I don't necessarily see... It was a surprise at the time when Polokwane City won. It was a surprise at the time when he won the second game. TS Galaxy won as well. But when you look at Sundowns, they give you spaces to play. And if you think about the iterations of Sundowns, that with Rulani was more control and they didn't play wide very, very often. He was very compact. Then you've got Mangoba, who did use his wingers and he did play those crosses. And what we said about Cardoso is that this team is able to adapt and they play more direct, which we didn't see when you got to FMB Stadium in terms of where is the direct play, because that's what was needed. Because if you think about the goals, I don't know which goal, the goal against Chiefs, where we loaded Reyners having pulled the defenders wide, and then Ribeiro making the second run to latch onto the cross by
Reyners.
Thank you. That suggested you guys can play the ball over the top. You guys can play more directly when the game requires it, because that was the only goal of the game. They needed to abandon their ideas of controlling the game and playing short triangles. They had to go long, and it worked. But on that day, they didn't look for that, and I don't know why. And I mean, first goal, you can then say they were caught cold turkey. Second goal, you're like, but guys, you're supposed to have been switched on, because this is a shock that you guys have considered after 2-3 minutes. You don't want to concede quickly again. Obviously, both those goals of a slip or a mistake at the back in key areas. And the idea of Modiba abandoning Suarez, and Suarez has to be the guy who's tracking Makgopa. I get Makgopa's not the fastest, not the most agile, but in that one instance, and in fact, the entire first half he was troubling Suarez on that right hand side, and you're like, Modiba, where are you to double up at least on that particular side? So I think that was a tactic they got wrong. Number one, number two. I think when you look at how both these teams played, maybe they should have switched with Mudau going further up front. And then you've got Modiba coming back. I think that's how you change and switch those sides in terms of how it works best in terms of dealing with the threat. Goal number two, Mudau again was sluggish in terms of tracking down Mfukeng for the second goal. You think to yourself, if Sundowns was switched on, Mudau was aware of the danger, because we kept saying to Mudau loves defending, and there was danger right there. You should have sniffed it out, you should have identified it and nullified it, but he didn't. Goal number two. So props to Rele, because composure early on. He gets onto the cross by Makgopa. It was a great finish for the second goal. He didn't do much. There was an attacking threat, but the industry from the boy was great. And I think industry won Paris that match, because where Sundowns are very dangerous is through the middle. And industry nullified a lot of those threats. Makaula, you can talk about Tainted Mbate as well. You can talk about the pressing from Mfukeng as well. Odlamine didn't do as much as we'd like. And for as long as Rivero says he trusts him, every time I see him, whether it's in person in the stadium or whether it's on the television, I don't quite see him in the center. As a 10, great. But sometimes you think to yourself, if there was another body there, we'd probably press better, probably have more space to play in. But maybe it worked out in the end because Paris came away as winners there. Jay, with Sundowns, what was very, very intriguing is the fact that neither one of the trio in midfield played a 10 role, or maybe even advanced beyond their general positions. Because I think maybe you've got players who are too similar, and generally it's not a problem. But when you've got Tebogo Mokwena, you've got Adams, and you've got Allende, and they all seem to be at the 8 role, you're like, okay, it's 6, you don't quite need it because you guys have control of the possession, especially in the second half. Someone go be an extra body, be a fourth body. And I think they didn't recognize that, which I think was something that hurt them. Number two, you've got the ball over the top where you can directly go and hurt Ukoki or CBS and force them to run, but they never did. Instead, they tried to penetrate on the sides. Van Rooyen was okay enough in the game, because I didn't think he tracked the player well enough. But when the ball did come onto his side, he'd double up no Makaul or double up with Tentembat. On the other side, there was no getting past Mbokas as much. Unless we speak about the 2 moments of magic where Ribeiro turned on a dime on the edge of the box, but those chances were not created because quickly was closed down yet again. So Sundowns had possession, but Sundowns didn't create chances, which is very curious because Sundowns score goals. Sundowns have got the record number of goals when you look at their campaign thus far in the season. When you look at the exploits in the cup competitions as well, they score 4. They scored 4 consecutive games. And so when they get to F and B, you ask yourself, where were you guys creating chances? Because I think except for the header was that in the first half, because that header hit the crossbar. Apart from that, there was no shot on goal in the entirety of the first half. It's only in the second half that they came out to play a bit more and were a bit more aggressive. So I'm a bit puzzled in terms of how they read that game. Not just the coach, but the players themselves in terms of, guys, let's send bodies up front because we need one. Especially after, fine, China had those tactics of delaying and trying to break the momentum because Sundowns pulled one back, which is something I don't like, by the way. Like, if we're a team that's going to win.
That helped
it probably did, Jay, but I see that week in, week out. Whether we're winning, whether we're losing, it's like China, the opportunities to kill the game and ice it. Scored a 3. Nkota came on and he had fresh legs and he's got pace to burn, but he's on the floor rolling around. You're like, if only he played that ball, because when he does then play the ball, avoiding a yellow card at the very last minute, it doesn't even clear the center line. So you're like, all that dilly-dallying for what? So I'm not a fan of that. Like, it's the same trait that I see in Tumile Nkune, where I'm like, dude, just play. You're good enough to save balls. The team is good enough to deal with the threat. Just play. But all in all, Jay, I think I was happy with the outing as a Pirates fan. The 2 early goals, it was a dream start. And if anything, I was worried about the fact that sometimes when Pirates get ahead in games, they tend to relax. They tend to play and dilly-dally the ball and take unnecessary risks at the back, and therefore they're punished. And the team pulls the goal back, and it's a bit closer than it's supposed to be. I think, case in point, SuperSport United game, fine, there's the error by China, but the game's supposed to be wrapped up, but SuperSport get that late equalizer. The game goes to penalties. But with this one, I think we played very well the entire time in terms of how we defended. The goal by Suarez, great. Sorry, the goal by Mdao. I think it was a foul by Kloik on Suarez, and the players froze for a minute there. Sundowns continued. The pass gets to Suarez and he scores to Mudau. I keep saying Suarez goes to Mudau, and well composed in terms of that finish. And I asked myself, where was that finish in the AFCON? But nonetheless, Jay, I
it's
think
funny. I actually thought the same thing.
yeah, because that was very
man,
skilled.
you look at you in the box and scoring. That is exactly what the country needed from you in that game against Nigeria. But alas,
Yeah, I think it's game on in terms of we can make a fight of it, but I think the league is gone, if I'm honest. Those two results against Garants and against Stelis, that hurt us.
yeah, we'll see, Chuck. I agree with you in terms of if Pirates can manage to come back in this one, it will be miraculous. They do have 4 games in hand. If they do manage to win all of them, then they are suddenly 3 points behind Sundowns, right? And hoping Sundowns can drop points somewhere along the line, but it does still look like a very tough mountain to climb. But kudos to Orlando Pirates for coming through with a game plan and executing on the game plan and winning that match against Sundowns. As I mentioned, the first time since 2020 they break that long run against Mamelodi Sundowns and not beating them in the league.
So we played at the FNB Stadium, that's Sundowns versus Pirates, and because the officials didn't think that the stadium would be filled to capacity, ticket prices went up to 90 Rand and 150s and stuff like that, which I think was quite exorbitant. A team who vacated that home ground for Sundowns and Pirates, Chiefs, well, they weren't going to play there because they went away to Richards Bay. They lost 2-0 to Richards Bay, and it's more woes for them, right? They've only scored 2 goals thus far, 2 goals in the last 5 games in the league. And yeah, it's hard to fix that team because if you look at Pule Modi not scoring, look at Utupre not scoring, the Liverpool not necessarily scoring. Do you think finding a striker, Jay, in the next season in the transfer window fixes all these problems? Is it as simple as that find a striker and Chiefs get scoring again?
Yes. I think it is as simple as a goal scorer. So twofold, right? They need goal scoring, which is it fixes that issue, Chuck. I don't know if it fixes the team though, because you're aware of the fact that we are now in the second half of the season. We're talking about Kaizer Chiefs' problems, and we're talking about them not scoring and them needing a striker, and whether a striker or goal scorer will be able to solve their problems. In the first half of the season, we're talking about Kaizer Chiefs having conceded as many goals as anyone else in the league thus far, ranking at the bottom or towards the bottom in terms of goals conceded. And the question was, how do you fix the defense? So in this season, the coach, the technical team have had to fix the defense. They are now faced with having to fix the striker. And then also within the season, we've been speaking about the fact that what is the solution in the middle of the park? Who do you start with in terms of the 3? What is the perfect balance? Because again, also in the game against Richards Bay, you have Ox who started next to Rele, but it seems to me that Ucele needs to be the 6 because Ox cannot progress the ball, right? He cannot receive from his defense. And he cannot get Kaizer Chiefs playing, but you do need his energy and his ability to break down attacks. But you still have the question, like, is it him, Rele, and Mart, or Castillo when he comes back, or Shabalala, or whoever else is able to play in that number 10, George Matlo? And there's still questions, right, in terms of what is the perfect thing. That team, from top to bottom, still needs a lot of work. And this is why this coach needs to be given time, I would say. But it's also hard to give him time because what really have we done in the season, you know? And I think it's a good thing the Kaizer Chiefs are in the semifinals of Nedbank Cup. And if they go on to win the Nedbank Cup, then that does buy you time. It buys you a lot of time. But Chuck, coming back to the matter of the goal scoring, I think that is an issue that does need to be solved, especially because regardless of me mentioning what might be happening, the questions they still need to answer in midfield. Kaizer Chiefs do create chances. And the game against Richards Bay, Kaizer Chiefs created so many chances. They got behind that Richards Bay defense on so many occasions, whether it was a ball that broke the defensive line or it was a cross into the box. The Kaizer Chiefs players did get their heads to the ball, but they couldn't convert. They didn't hit the target. Or they get on the outside of the Richards Bay defense and they put crosses into the box and they make box entries, right, in the way that you want them to, but they are so inaccurate when they get in front of goal. Everything works building up to that point Where is the guy who's going to put the ball in the back of the net? That is the question. And the thing is, so far this season, one of the solutions was spreading the love, spreading the goals around. When Utuba was playing before he went down with injury, he was scoring goals, but Shabalala was also scoring goals. I believe at some point they were the joint leading goal scorers for Kaizer Chiefs this season in the league with 4 goals each. And when Duba went down, also Shabalala, he also went down, and coming back into the team hasn't been as seamless as it was. And I believe Shabalala's last goal in the league, at least, was that wonder goal, that solo effort last year. So those players still need to improve, and the issue with those players is that they're young, right? And the length of the season does catch up with the young players. I think just more experience is going to do them well. So in that sense, that is something that's going to quote unquote solve itself. But the coach does still need to work on them, and that's the beautiful thing about them being young as well, that there's still room for them to take in lessons and for them to improve. People like Ranga, not so much. People like Morris, not so much, which is why I didn't quite understand that signing. But Chuck, I do think that they need a goal scorer. That man at TS Galaxy is perfect.
It's coming to Pirates.
That man at TS Galaxy is perfect, and I knew you were going to say that. And my response to that is that if the Pirates do get him, they need to go get Umabasa at Orlando Pirates, because he is sharing time with Mahop. I don't know if we are still in the age where players are willing to make that move. We remember famously once upon a time, Mkhize, he made the move from Orlando Pirates to Kaizer Chiefs. And there's been a whole host of players who played for both teams, not necessarily going from one to the other, right? But Zamovic, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Zamovic, in terms of goal score, he's scored 8 goals already this season, which is, I think, the third time ever a TS Galaxy player has scored this many goals. And he's not been there for too long, It's his goal scoring. It's the way that he is able to hold up play and bring those players that I mentioned, Abo Duba, Abo Shabalala, Abo Matlo, whoever else, Castillo, when he's back, we've seen how he's able to ghost into the box and score goals. He'll be able to bring them into those goal scoring positions, and hopefully they do convert, as we've seen glimpses that they're able to. But I do think they do need a striker. I do think the striker they need is Zamovic at TS Galaxy, both for his goals and what he's able to do in terms of helping the other players, the other offensive-minded players, score goals.
I think, Jay, maybe it may be oversimplified to say all they need is a striker, and you should detail how the coach needs to work on the team. Because if I think about Pep Guardiola's team, for instance, in Man City, right? They've got Aguero, who was a record goal scorer, but they created easy enough chances for that. A player like Sterling has like 100 goals in the league, where you're like to yourself, I was not the same player at Liverpool, but he gets to City and Pep improves players. But then when he goes to Chelsea and he goes to Arsenal, you're like, but where's the improvement? Because their team in itself is not at that particular level. So I think about the fact that, yes, strikers will do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of getting goals, winning new games at crucial moments. Because if you think about great Kaizer Chiefs side, Jay, there is Knowledge Musona, there is Tabang Libesi, there's Mbesuma, obviously, there's a Poland line, and players who hit the back of the net. But when those players are out in terms of being injured or missing games due to disciplinary reasons, Chiefs themselves as a team don't say, woe is me, what are we going to do? They figure things out up until those players are back. Then I ask myself, if they were to get Uzajmovic or they get Mabasa, if that player gets injured, does the team have enough quality to then find the back of the net? And I think these are issues that the coach has to figure out. And hence, when you mention someone like Morris, I think to myself, so that guy thought Morris would solve the issue because it's more of the same. Lepo has improved a bit, although if I'm honest, the more I watch of him, I'm like, I don't know if he's going to revolutionize Chiefs. Yes, he's held down that spot. It's his spots out there on the left. I don't know how much he can give to the team, but what he does bring is confidence. Because I think, especially with the Mesaga Tushabalala on the midweek last week, where what's the keeper? The Cape Town City keeper is trying to close him down. You're like, pass it on the far post, and he goes for the near post, and he completely misses, and you're like, yeah, it's these kind of moments that cost Chiefs the game, because you're looking for goals from everyone. What they can do, Jay, is when Arteta said we don't have a striker and we're not willing to find a striker, we'll find goals elsewhere from set pieces. That's been Kevin Hunt's bread and butter for the longest time. Long balls, set pieces. Chiefs need to find solutions other than just looking at the striker. Yes, having a striker would be better, because You give the ball to Modi and he misses. You give the ball to Ranga and he misses. You give the ball to Dupree and you miss. And you're like, but guys, we're creating chances because in terms of the number of chances created, Chiefs are high up there. It's just a matter of then actually converting because I think the conversion rate is less than 10%, which is appalling for a team who creates as many chances as they do. So I think a striker would help loads. But I think also Chiefs need to play football that would help themselves a lot. Get bigger bodies if you want to go with the set pieces. Find players who are willing to take players one-on-one. Liverpool does that on the one side, but on the other side, Pulemori doesn't do that often. He likes the ball over the top. So play a situation, a system or a tactic that helps, that plays to the strengths of those players. So Nabi Nayeche, it's been a long time. Going to Nabi's cooking. I don't know how much he's actually changed in the team. Apart from Rele coming, who is an actual player, not necessarily a coaching or an improvement of the system, other than Ulilepo, who is a signing as well, not necessarily a system. I don't know, have they really improved? I mean, for the last couple of games, we said they've closed up a move. And then they conceded 4 against Supersport. Then 2 now against Richards Bay. So I don't know has the team actually progressed? So there's a lot to be done there, Jay. Definitely there's a lot. I mean, the good news, as you said, is that they're in the Nedbank Cup semis. If they convert, he's got more time, obviously. But I think it's more than just a striker.
I think if they have to start from scratch, Chuck, with another coach, another technical team, it's going to set them back. I'm not advocating for Nabi because, he looks like he's about to revolutionize Kaizer Chiefs and is about to get them winning the league next season or whatever the case may be, Yeah. But I think it behooves them to give it a chance. And if it doesn't work, it's right where you've been for the last decade, Mm-hmm. But in terms of thinking that it's just a striker, so what you were saying that they need to reject some things or rethink their approach. I don't think they need to rethink their approach because the fact that they do create the chances. Mm-hmm. The issue is that what happens at the end of those chances, as you noted, that their conversion rate is low. So that is twofold. Either the players you have improve their ability, which is a hard thing to do at this point, and at this juncture in the season, probably what we have is they are who they are. So if we are still creating the chances, then what we need someone to finish them off, someone who is going to come ready-made with a higher conversion rate, and that's why I do think that the solve is going and getting someone who already is doing that somewhere else, Mm-hmm. So I think Chuck. I think that is the issue in terms of goal scoring. They have other issues now that they need to sort out. So I'm not touching on those. But specifically, as we have seen that they're on a barren run now, 2 goals in the last 5 games in the league. I do think a Zajmovic or a Mabasa, if he feels disgruntled and that he's sharing or his time mm-hmm. with the strike, and he feels that as someone who has won the Golden Boot in the league, I want to be somewhere I'm playing week in, week out and improve my chances of getting to Bafana. It's far-fetched, right? It's not likely to happen, but you go for that. And because beyond that, I don't see many guys. You can maybe point out Boyeli as Kukune, but
I think Ukabadino Mhango can get for like 2 seasons.
No, Chuck.
No.
I don't think they should go get Mhango.
He's
is like
scoring more than
early to mid 30s.
He's still scoring. Do you want a project for the future? Like I think someone who's gonna get the goals now because two are still there and waiting. I don't know if Mabasa is gonna move from Paris to Chiefs. Jay.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen. That's why I'm saying it's like Zajmovic and Kozulon. Team is always trying to sell players to Kaizer Chiefs, and if you go there, he's available because you mentioned Pirates and you want Zajmovic because you're a Pirates fan. But the truth of the matter is, if I'm Zajmovic and I'm looking at the situation in Pirates, I don't want to go compete with Umabasa and Umakhopa when neither one of them is able to hold down that position as it is. And it's not because, they're inconsistent as such. It's because they're good enough and they bring different things. Now you might make the argument that he brings the best of both worlds from those two strikers. But to begin with, that situation is a hard one to break into. I don't want any of that. You look at Kaizer Chiefs, which is a move up in terms of in the PSL because of their name at this point. There is a position ready for you to walk into and to own. So just go to Tim, talk to Tim. You'll get Zajmovic, and based on what we've seen so far from him, I think he'd be a good addition to Kaizer Chiefs and help solve most of their problems in front of goal. Chuck, a man who is wondering whether he is the problem solver or he is the problem himself, Rulani Mokwena, right? We love Rulani's sound bites, and he's facing some pressure from the Wydad fans. Of course, the league, the Portola League in Morocco, has already been won by RS Berkane, winning their first title. And Wydad find themselves 17 points back in trying to get back into the Champions League. They haven't won the league title in 2 seasons. I believe they haven't won anything for 2 seasons. And now they might not make it to the Champions League, although they find themselves 2 points at this juncture behind the team that is in second place. And the fans are not happy. And Rulani has come out and he's responded to the fans by saying that he had options. He could have gone to any other team that is currently in the Champions League. Well, not any other team. There were teams in the Champions League who wanted him. He turned them down because he loved the culture at Wydad based on his encounters with them when he was at Sundowns. And he chose them. But if they feel, the fans of Wydad, if the management of Wydad feels that Rulani is the problem and not the solution, he is happy to go. What do you make of Rulani's fighting words?
A little too honest sometimes. As it's good for the press, it's good for sound bites, but it shows a bit of vulnerability because he should be saying, guys, where did I find you? Where are you now? Stop moaning. Because that's the thing about these teams right in the north. It looks nice from the outside until you come in and you're like, oh, Peter was winning you leagues. In your heart, you didn't want him at Al-Ahly. And you're like, but guys, what's the problem here? Because it's not like Rulani found them in first position and now they're in third. He's found them in worse places and now in a worse place.
Sixth place with 44 points last season. With 5 games to go, they've got 43 points.
And this is something to complain about still. So sometimes, to be honest with you, this, and I say it the North because I see it in Tunisian teams, I see it in Egyptian teams where everyone wants a quick fix. And I don't know how these things work because somehow these things work because as much as I bemoan their approach and their way of doing things and how the fans react, sooner or later, Wydad will win something, with or without Rulani, because that's just how it works. Al-Ahly will moan, and I think also it's because they bully the referees. Then they'll tell you they want foreign referees. If there are no foreign referees, they're not coming to play. And you're like, since when in football do you choose the officials as a team? And if you don't have the officials that you like, you don't show up. So in the North, things work differently. But to the question, Jay, I think he needs to tell people to back off. If I'm the problem, Zohamba Vele, but I think he needs to be not someone who is, they're fighting wars, but he should make it clear that I am not the problem. There are new players here. You guys will. I'm putting things together. My system takes time to put together. He says, "This is the best possible way that I know how to play. I did my research. I did my studying. I've got new players. I'm integrating new players that I got in the January transfer window as well. So it will take time. The fact that we are third is good news because it can only get better from here. So the fact that the fans want his head and people are putting pressure on him in that position, I think that's majorly ungrateful.
Yeah. Where Rulani is concerned, he does not shy away from saying exactly the thing that he's thinking, right? And that does put to question what is his emotional intelligence like, because when he does get pressured, he fights back, and he wants you to remember who he is. I remember famously, like when Sundowns were knocked out of the Champions League last season, he spoke about the fact that he's 37, and people seem to forget that he is a young coach and has achieved everything that he has. Because one of the things he also said in recent times to the Moroccan press is that he was born and bred in football. You know, Rulani comes from maybe the most famous family in South African football history, the Sono family, and how what he's experiencing with the Wydad fans is like he's not used to that, and this is not how things are supposed to be. But I think in this instance, Chunk, he was well within his rights to say, hold up, y'all must have forgotten who I am and how I got here. I didn't get here because I paid someone to come here. I didn't have favors to call in with the owners or the management or whatever the case may be. Initially, what Rulani had told us after he left Sundowns is that he's going to take a sabbatical. And at the same time, Wydad were looking for a coach. They were actively looking for a coach. And then Wydad themselves suspended their search for a coach and said, zero in on that guy. Because he's suddenly become available. We didn't know he was going to become available. But now that he's on the market, we want him. And they went and got him, you know, and he went there. Now, Rulani is not doing them a favor by being their coach. I mean, he's paid to be their coach. He's well remunerated to be their coach. And also, he comes into an institution which is record champions of the Moroccan League, and they are one of the most successful teams on the continent. And he's experienced that, Rulani, with Sundowns firsthand, So the combination is one of a great club who went to get a great coach. But let us not forget that he is a great coach based on what he's done at Sundowns. Now, maybe you might say, okay, we are actually questioning how great is he, because can he go somewhere else and do it? He couldn't do it at Orlando Pirates. We can't count cheaper because it was there for like 5 minutes. And that's the question. Outside of the comforts of Sundowns, can you do it? But you cannot go away from what he did with Sundowns, and the fact that you finished in 6th place and now you're in 3rd place, you're in with an opportunity to get to 2nd place. Maybe he's arrogant in saying that he's not going to go away from his playing style. I don't know what playing style the Wydad fans want. All they want is to win. But guess what? You don't always win the league. Like sometimes another team does win the league. And we're talking about the champions this season. RS Berkane are one of the favorites to go on to lift the Confed Cup. And they are 15 points up the road with 5 games to go. They've already secured the title. So they've had quite and now having quite a good season, But you do need to give Rulani some time. And I do think he's well within his rights to say that, hey, look at my CV. Famously, Jose Mourinho told us this as well at a time where he had 3 league titles in England and all the others combined at what, 1 at the time. He was well within his rights to say, hold on, keep it quiet a bit, because who are you talking to? Did you forget who you're talking to? Now, if it persists, then we have to come back and say, well, it doesn't really matter what you did yesterday or a season ago or 3 seasons back. The question is, what are you doing right now? Right now, though, when we talk about Wydad, it's a team that finished in 6th place that is trying to begin with to get back into the Champions League and Champions League spots, and he's still within the running to do that. And then from there, get us to winning the title. So the reaction where they are fed up with him at this point is it's typical of football fans. And football fans are fickle. And I get the fans of the teams that have been more successful are even more fickle. But yeah, man, they had a go at Rulani. And I think he's well within his rights to defend himself by pointing out who he is.
Yeah, man, he needs time, because if you remember, he's just been there for 1 season and he's put them in 3rd spot and they're in a good spot to get to the Champions League. If it was 2 seasons or 3 seasons and there are no fruits, then you can be mad. But at this point in time, is there no improvement really? But speaking of a team that did give their manager time, Arsenal came up against Chelsea in the weekend. If we shift over to Europe and we go to the English Premier League, they played... it was an okay game, but Arsenal figured out how to win. Marino being the makeshift striker, because Arteta, given time, will find a solution, I guess. And this then continues their run. Yes.
Are you saying Arteta's Batman?
If he has prep time.
You give him prep time, he'll figure it out. Look at that.
But given enough time and with the personnel that he has, he's then extended his run, his undefeated run, at least, against the top 6 in the English Premiership. And he's gone 19 games now without having lost to either it's either Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea, or Man United. Obviously, Arsenal form the big 6 themselves. So, Jay, does this mean anything at this point in time? Obviously, there are no league titles to go with that, but his resilience and the fact that he can come up and play the big games against the big guys, regardless of whether you've got a Haaland, you've got a Bruno, but Arteta will find a way to, if not win, at least avoid defeat. Does that mean anything?
If Arsenal go on to win the Champions League, it means something. Because if they go on to win the Champions League, and now I've said to you, at the beginning of the season when everybody was healthy, with the players down in those forward line, it's a bit tricky and a bit different. But I'd say to you earlier in the season, I think Arsenal are built to go and do well in the Champions League because they are defensively stout. And they don't play sexy football. It is risk averse, and in those knockout competitions, you want to not get beaten, right? Because that's the only chance you get. And then with the set pieces, you can go and nick a goal. So similarly to what you saw in the performance against Chelsea, not great on the ball, didn't have much of the possession, in fact, and then did get a winner of a set piece. And it's what we saw as well when Arsenal went down to 10 men against City earlier in the season, and they stopped playing. They decided to park the bus and absorb the pressure. I wasn't really even playing on the counter in that match, right? And they almost got there, but then there was the equalizer by John Stones with the last kick of the match. But when you look at that blueprint, that tells you that when you come up against the really good teams, you can hold them off. But also what Arsenal have shown is that, and in the Champions League, if they play against teams that don't sit in a low block, but who do want to play against them, they are better in those situations. And that's what you're going to come across in the Champions League. So that's why I say, Chuck, if they go on to win the Champions League, it means something, because what we know is that there is a body of work that against what are the strongest teams in their league, they don't lose. But if that doesn't happen, Chuck, and it's another trophyless season, it means nothing. It is 19 games without losing against any of these big six teams, which is the equivalent of half of a 38-game Premier League season, right? But it doesn't mean anything. And these are the things that follow Arsenal. These are the stats that follow Arsenal. I remember when Arsenal finished in 5th place, losing out in the last 3 games against Spurs, right? I think Arteta's second season. They had a period where from the start of the Christmas period until the end of the season, Arsenal were in top 4 form. But then if you don't actually finish in the top 4, you miss out on the Champions League. What's the point of that? Last year, in 2024, Arsenal accumulated the most points of any team. So in the calendar year log, Arsenal finished on top. But do you win any trophies or medals for that? No, you don't. So, Chuck, if at the end of the season, what Arsenal then have is that, because I think there's one more game against the top 6 team that is coming up, that is Liverpool at Anfield. And they go there and they don't lose that one and they extend it to 20. But then they are forming a guard of honor for Liverpool before that match. It means absolutely nothing.
I think I want to echo those last words you just said, Jay. I think it means nothing. It's great for the derby nights and when you play Spurs and you're like, how we did it to you again. When you play against the biggest team in England, in Man United, the most successful team in recent times, in City, like, we have the firepower to beat you. But if you're not lifting anything at the end of the day, because this winning run stretches, I think, back to 2023 at the latest in terms of their last defeat. There are no cups between then and now, and look, it's great. It's like finishing second. You must have beaten a lot of teams on the way there. You must have played good football on the way there. But then in the end, what do you show for it? Because as bad as Man United were, and this is the conversation that we kept having, as bad as United were, and they're probably the team that you beat the most in that run, they've got a Carabao, they've got an FA Cup, and somehow, someway they figured out how to do it. And that's the thing about winning. You have to figure out how to do it when it counts most. If anything, it says to me that Arsenal play the big games well. I don't know if they take their eye off when they get to West Ham, when they get to Brighton at the end of the season, at key times of the season, where you're like, but guys, you could have won that game. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but the big games, they can show up for those games. So that, Jay, I can't look at that stat and say it's a great team, because great teams win things. It's a memorable run. It's a great achievement, but are they a great team? I don't know if Arteta has built a great team, because after 56 years, we get into it. Newcastle has finally won something. All the noise that we had around Eddie Howe and all the money didn't mean much up until they could convert. Now, mind you, Slot, great team, but we're waiting for the conversion. Out of the Champions League, didn't win the Carabao Cup final. So I think those things are great up until it comes to a halt. So I agree with you in terms of until you win something, it means nothing. It just proves that in big games, Arsenal show up.
Yeah, Chuck. And the thing is, right, not all big games are created equal. Because, and that's why I say, if you go on to win the Champions League, then you are converting your big game ability to when it counts, where you're going to get something at the end of it. And it's not to say these games are useless. Of course, they're not useless, because you are trying to accumulate points in the league towards the end goal of winning the league. Because historically, in recent times, at least in recent history, Arsenal were accused of being soft and going into those big games and just absolutely crumbling, you know. And as an Arsenal fan, I'll say, Chuck, it feels good that you go into those games and you don't have a dread about, oh my goodness, I know exactly what's coming. We're going to get pumped 5 or like in the first 20 minutes by Liverpool, or score 3 goals but like concede 6 against a Man City. That has come and gone, and what it does protect you against is banter, I suppose, right? But Chuck, if you are managing to not lose against the City in the one season, but they still pip you for the league title, What's the point? If you're managing to not lose against Liverpool this season, but they still pip you towards the title, what's the point? Okay, you are beating Man United at home, and then you're coming back on them when you're playing away from home. But this is not 2001. Yes, you get bragging honors, but what does it really do for you? And I don't even talk about Spurs; they don't even count in this chat. And Chelsea as well. Like Arsenal used to just falter at the sight of Chelsea when they were led by a Didier Drogba. But this Chelsea, and yes, the names are there, and you're not losing in these big clashes, and they mean something, right? Because of the marketing aspect of it, at least. But really, if you lose against Chelsea and you are cemented to be 15 points behind Liverpool as opposed to 12, you're still 12 points behind. What's the point? Unless Liverpool go on in a historic bender and they absolutely they bottle it in the most spectacular fashion, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I think this thing suggests to me, Che, that Arsenal needs more players who have the eye on the ball, more players who are hungry, more players who can get you results even when you guys are not necessarily at the races. And I say this because it proves that when the stakes are high, Arsenal will show up. It proves that Arsenal can beat the big boys, but they need a little bit more in terms of the final push for silverware. Because if you look at the time when they were in the Europa, you guys got knocked out by, is it Porto? This is a game where you guys were supposed to win. You're supposed to be cruising, but you didn't have your eye on that game.
Team, Sporting.
Sporting. Yeah. Oh yeah, those kind of games you're like, okay, it should be in the bag. And then when you look at the blips against, like I said, the West Hams, the Liverpools, where Liverpool weren't necessarily great, you guys had them, and then you allow them to come back on you guys, and you're like, you need to win those moments. Yes, by and large you have, hence the record. But I think it just says that you're on the right track, but you need a little bit more, because if we're just looking at that body of work, it's incomplete. It's great, but you have to attach it to something else. They've beaten the top 6 sides, and they've done something. They've beaten the top 6 sides, and they've got this player for the push. I mean, find the injuries and suspensions and stuff like that. It happens in football, but I think that's a sign that they need a little bit more.
Where were you in 1969? Do you know what's the last thing that happened in 1969 that happened for the first time since then? On the weekend, it was Newcastle winning a trophy, Chuck. And one of the more rabid fan bases in England, Newcastle, of course, coming through with the victory in the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool and ending a 56-year drought for silverware. You might look at it now as one of the fans of the big teams is 5 years. 5 years becomes 20, becomes 30, becomes a long, long time. But Newcastle have ended that drought. But I have to ask, Chuck, considering that Newcastle have won a title and ended the drought in the dispensation of the ownership of the Saudis, is this silverware tainted, or is it still filled with all the romance of they haven't done it in a long time? Kudos to them.
There's nothing you can tell the Geordies that'll taint that particular moment. That'll take them out of that euphoria, because it's been 56 years. Whether by hook or crook, the Geordies just want to lift some piece of silverware. They were close 2 seasons ago against Man United, but got pipped in the final 2-0. But this time playing against another tougher opposition in terms of where Liverpool are and the kind of players that they have compared to that United side, they've gone a step better and they've gone to win that. So based on that, they can't. But also based on the ownership, Jay, for the mere fact Uguti, maybe now in retrospective thinking, the board and the people upstairs want to say that we want to vet people a little bit closer before we give them ownership. They got their chance fair and square. They bid for the rights to buy the club, and they got permission, or they were allowed to do so. And if anything, Jay, we thought to ourselves, because we kept comparing the budgets or the value of each ownership group in terms of this team is worth 2 billion, this one 10 billion. The group that has bought Newcastle United, I think, are worth 450 billion. And we thought to ourselves, Neymar is coming to Newcastle, Mbappe is coming to. It never happened that way. And for that reason, Jay, because they spent on a Bruno Guimaraes, I think it was there even before they did that, Isak, they've spent modestly. It's still been largely a team that Eddie Howe took over when he came and got the reins. So for me, from that perspective, Jay, I think it was one fair and square. I don't think it was. I mean, we want to say as often as we can, especially me from the red side of Manchester, City bought the league, because every time they fail, they throw money at it. Okay, United throw money at it as well, just not at the same rate of success. But you wanna put the charge against the fact that, genuinely speaking, in the spirit of football, you guys brought your way to the titles. Newcastle did not do that. So I don't think there's tainting on any level, Jay.
Chuck.
Yes.
It's the Saudis, man. They're backed by a state. And the state which, if you go back many episodes, before we're even on YouTube speaking about this, that have performed crimes against humanity, you know, and it's hard to just full on celebrate with Newcastle. And Newcastle are everyone's second team. Like I remember in the 2000s, they were my second team. At least, like I loved those teams with Alan Shearer, and your, who am I thinking about?
Gary Speed,
Shola Amiobi,
his younger brother, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and with that fan base, like I remember back in the day, like on Sky, they used to show how many fans were in the stadium, or what the average attendance was, and I remember it was always United with Old Trafford, and it was St. James's Park with Newcastle, and it's like, man, those fans fill up that stadium even though they win nothing. You know, yes, they do have some great performances, some great players. You check Teotis, I'm saying your Alan Shearers, but they never really win anything. And they're going to make the Champions League under Sir Bobby Robson one season, and there's a full good factor, but then you fast forward a few seasons, they get relegated. But those fans still stick with them, and they are noisy, and they are boisterous, and they love their team, and they were on the verge of being relegated once again. But Eddie Howe worked a miracle to revive them from being second to last on the log, and actually having a solid, healthy finish in that season. And then in the next season, that's when the money came, right? And that's when we see the additions of someone like an Isak, who scores a goal in that final, and he is the talisman. And it is tainted, Chuck.
No, wait.
But all of football is tainted, because the reason we're able to see Saudi ownership is because before that, we saw the Abu Dhabi group own Manchester City. Before that, we saw Roman Abramovich, who since has been kicked out of football because he's been exonerated, though, as well. But he came into Chelsea, gave them $1 billion and said, you don't need to pay me back, you know. And he also does have a checkered past. So I'm not going to get you and be preachy that Newcastle are tainted and they are something different other than the other teams. And the other thing is that the competitive balance was never going to be restructured away from the teams who were at a certain point already powerhouses financially, your Manchester Uniteds of this world, unless there were benefactors who came in and funded these teams. I'm not happy about the fact that Newcastle are backed by Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince because of everything I know about that country, and and their violations against human rights. But as I'm saying, it's not as though we didn't see a World Cup in Qatar just a few years ago with everything.
I want to say it now. Messi's World Cup win is tainted. Continue.
And the man who's the face of Saudi Arabia is Ronaldo, who's playing there right now. You've got no leg to stand on. Don't you dare come at Lionel Messi and his ties to winning a World Cup in the desert. Like,
he's growing the
when you've
football
got
there.
the highest paid athlete in the world was continuing to front.
He's there for change, just like Beckham was there for change.
Ronaldo. He's there for change.
Messi was there for
change
glory.
while taking their money. But yeah, Chuck. But ultimately, man, it really is a feel-good factor for Newcastle, for their fans. If you step away from how they bought the players that they have, for those fans, and this is what football is about. You haven't seen this team win anything in your lifetime, and they've finally done it. And the Carabao Cup, for the big teams, it's a consolation prize, and it's something that they don't really feel anything about if they don't win it. But for a team like a Newcastle who haven't won anything for over half a century, it means absolutely everything, and it's gonna be great to see them on that bus and in that parade. And those Jodies are gonna come out there with no shirts on, and with all of them looking like Jack Grealish in a parade.
On the other side of that final year was the Liverpool side, who, I mean, there was noise about Mo Salah playing in AFCON. It was not big enough. But now Mo Salah has no Carabao Cup to his name because he lost the final. No prospects of winning the Champions League because they got knocked out by PSG. Does their season all of a sudden end in an anticlimactic way if they just have the league? Because they've got the points buffer over Arsenal. They're in a comfortable place, and it looks odds on that they go on and they convert. But there was a quadruple on at some point. They were going to win the treble at some point when they fell off, obviously in the FA Cup, yeah, by Plymouth. Do you think at this point in time, minus these two competitions, if they just get the league, is it anticlimactic in terms of what it could have potentially turned out to be?
Liverpool have had a week from hell, being knocked out of the Champions League, and then following that up with a cup final loss against Newcastle. But absolutely not. If Liverpool go on to lift the Premier League title, this has been an excellent season. You come into the season as one of the big teams trying to win first and foremost the league or the Champions League or both. You know, if you end up with one, that means you've beaten the other 19 teams in your league over a period that stretches from August until May in a marathon that I consider the hardest thing to do in football, winning a league title, particularly in an England where there are so many competitive teams, and in recent times, though, it has been turned into a farmers league by Pep and his boys. You win the Premier League title, that is a successful season. Does not matter what you've done anywhere else, especially for Liverpool, who have won Champions League titles before, you know, and not done well in the league. Well, previously, the last two Champions League titles that they won in 2005, finished fifth, 30 points off champions Chelsea in that season. And then they won again in 2019, and that was the season of the heartbreak in the league, where they finished 2 points behind Manchester City, even though they had 97 points. And where Liverpool are concerned, and the league specifically, Chuck, I think more than the Champions League, they've coveted the league. So where a team like a Man United felt that they should have won more Champions League titles under Sir Alex Ferguson because of what they did in the league, and they coveted the Champions League so much, or a Chelsea who Roman Abramovich pumped the money into Chelsea and they started winning league titles almost immediately. And for the longest time, the Holy Grail was the Champions League, and eventually they won that. Or a City who, same thing. They won all those league titles, and the Holy Grail was the Champions League. For Liverpool, it's the league, because especially the most special one was the one under Klopp, of course, because it was the first time in 30 years. But if you do go back 30 years from that point, Liverpool have 18 league titles. The next best team, I believe, has 7, right? And the Scotsman at Old Trafford says that he's gonna knock them off their effing perch. I was like, how likely is that? Like, there's a big gap that you're trying to overhaul. Yeah. And he overhauled Liverpool. And Liverpool prided themselves on being the most successful team in England. They still are in terms of overall titles won, right? But they did fall behind in terms of league titles to Manchester United. This one gives them right there equal with United at 20, so they're back on top. And I do think because of what happened in the last 35 years, they have really coveted the league even more than the Champions League. For them, that is their holy grail. So a season where Klopp left and you thought there was going to be an emotional downturn where they are all mourning the loss or the departure of Klopp. And here comes in the manager from Feyenoord. We don't really know what to expect, especially how they fell off last season. And then he comes in and straight away, you know, they win the league. Oh man, that is a brilliant season. Regardless of how they've fallen away in the other competitions, I still think if they win the league, it's not anticlimactic. Now, if they lose it, it's a different conversation.
I think when you look back, when the campaign is done, you say, well done for having won the league. But while you're living it in real time, you have no business losing to Plymouth. You have no reason. I mean, you must be the stronger team.
City struggled against Plymouth as well.
Yeah, but they won in the end. And that's what I'm trying to get at. That when you are odds-on favorites to win, and you are this team that's on top of the Champions League table, you're top of the local domestic table as well. What was Plymouth? And then you fall. Fine, it's the magic of the FA Cup. It happened. And then, yeah, fine, you could have gotten better teams to play against in the knockouts than PSG, because you finished top of the league. You don't want to get PSG. Give me someone like a PSV, as Arsenal were happy to have, and they dispatched them. But this is what this team was able to do, at least under Klopp that we might not go all the way to win it, but we go deep in this competition. We can beat the PSGs. I mean, they were beating Real Madrid and other big teams in the table format of the Champions League earlier in the season. And when they get to PSG, you're like, guys, this is what you were made for. Anfield nights, apparently, we keep hearing are magical. There was not enough magic on the night. And if you're living off that magic, that euphoria, and Mo Salah's goal scoring records and stuff like that, you're like, we should be doing something great this season. And so for it to not have happened,
Check's the worst possible draw they could have gotten in the Champions League, right? And the reason for it is because PSG were mucking about in the first part of the league phase, the table phase, and then they've caught fire. They were on the way to winning a League One title once again, and there's an argument that they are the most informed team in Europe at the moment. Think about the fact that, and as I'm saying, it's the quirk of how PSG played early on, and then how the table works. Because if Liverpool had finished in the position of a Barcelona, they get Benfica and then Dortmund to follow it up. And the likelihood is that we talk about Liverpool in the semi-final, you know, and they took it to penalties against PSG. So they lost at the end of the day, right? Yeah. And you can't make excuses around that. But when you consider who they played and you think, well, any of the other teams who are in the quarterfinals, if they had gotten PSG, the likelihood is that they also would have gotten the same result. They would have also been knocked out of the Champions League. So,
but Jay, if I were to steal from a page from your book where you say, if you're looking to go deep, then you lament with, PSG, they end our run. But if you're going to go all the way, it doesn't matter who you face, because eventually you have to beat those guys. And with them being on top of the table, they were the team that were favorites at that point. We're like, we threw who they play? They played Real Madrid. They played a couple of big games, and they won all of them. And you're like, okay, these guys are the business. They've got a Darwin Núñez, but they win. They've got a Luis Diaz, but they win. They figured it out. And for them to fall,
that's the nature of the cup, right?
Yeah,
and the nature of penalties, because the results against PSG is that Liverpool won away from home, and then they drew at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that's the league, they got 4 points of PSG. Which Arsenal beat PSG in the league phase. They got 3 points. And that counts for something, I suppose, because they haven't met PSG in the knockouts. So it's like more than like winning and drawing, what really can you do? It's the lottery of the penalties. What I'm saying about their result, Chuck, is that it's not out and out disappointing. So it's not in the same breath as a Plymouth being knocked out by Plymouth in the FA Cup. Mm-hmm. It's one where you look at it and I'm like, yeah, I mean, you did as much as you can without actually winning that tie. So I don't look at that result against PSG and think, man, that is disappointing for everything that you did in the Champions League up to that point.
I mean, I take it in the context of you guys went out early to Plymouth and that was a shock result, and then as you said, in the week from hell, as the PSG result, then it's the Carabao Cup, where you were heavy favorites as well against Newcastle. Fine, Newcastle have shown good form and good character in the league, and you thought to yourself they'll make a fight of it, but you still edged towards Liverpool, especially with Mo Salah in that form. And then for it just to be with you guys are just in the league, in real time, it feels...
Not just the league, Chuck. You can't speak about the league as just the league. Like, oh man, you had like 4 equal opportunities to win trophies, and it's like, oh man, you're just down to 1. It's the league.
It's big, and I mean... It's big because I think of a conversation, I think it was on the overlap, where Carragher was saying it's special when you win the league. It's good when you win the league once or twice, but speaking to Paul Scholes at this point, but it's real special players for someone like you, Paul, who's won 6 or 7 times. And just before he goes on, Paul is like, 6 or 7? I've won 11, buddy. 6 or 7.
They're real.
But it is a big thing, Jay, the league. That's why I can tell you, when you look at it in hindsight, for me, I think you're top of the table as Liverpool, but you're feeling down. That's the feeling that I have if I were a fan. Oh man, it could have been so much better. We could have at least had something to celebrate our hard work till this point in the season. But I think, Jay, the league is a big thing. You don't look at that and say, because the truth of the matter is, and the noise has been made because Man United have won the Carabao Cup and Liverpool have won the Carabao Cup. Pep, I keep remembering these words where Pep's like, when I win them, no one cares.
That's true.
But when the teams are desperate and they want them, then they're a big thing. So, I mean, we can choke off the Carabao Cup. Really, when we talk about treble, we talk about FA Cup, Champions League, and the league itself. And yeah, we talk about there's not much that they could have done with PSG being as hot as they are. Give them a pass. The fact that they can secure one of those big titles, I think you look back at that and say, okay, it was a fair enough season, and the points difference, I think, as well. If things were close and they were
fair enough season. It's a great season. It's a
Ah,
great season when you're in the league.
but there's that somber anticlimactic thing to it because you
Right
can't be
now.
out
Right
now.
now in
Yeah,
March.
right now. Yeah.
When we get to May and the context around Liverpool specifically as well, as I mentioned, with their relationship in the league, there's also the fact that they do have one Premier League title, but that was one without fans.
Mm-hmm.
This one is going to hit like crack when that whistle and that result happens, which confirms them as league champions, and they are also then on the bus, and there's a million Scousers lining up the streets to greet their Premier League champions. All of what happened in the middle of March is going to be long forgotten.
Let's hope so. Unless Arsenal have got their own bus, and you're like, damn it, we should have won it. If it's those guys who got into the final, we should have won it. But let's see how that season peters out. Let's see how that season ends because they're in a good spot in the Premier League. And as you said, Jay, it's a great thing. But in the moment, for me, it's you do feel down.
Let's see how it ends. Indeed, you have come to the end of this particular episode of the 2UpFront podcast. You can, if you are new here, you can subscribe. We advise that you subscribe to the channel. Please like and share our videos. Please do comment in the comment section. We love hearing from you. We love engaging with you. And you can also continue the conversation with us across all of our social media platforms. And it is at 2UpFront Pod everywhere where there is social media. I am at J_Mzulu. Chuck is at Chuck2Up. From myself, Jay, I'm outie.
When Newcastle fans had forgotten what it was like to lift the trophy they did this weekend, when Wydad fans had forgotten who Rulani Mokwena is, he gave them that speech. And when Sundowns thought they'd wrapped it up, Rele reminded them that there's still a league title to fight for. Let's hope it goes down to the wire. Let's hope Pirates convert. Let's hope it's exciting. This is Chuck, and I'm out.